I hurt Spencer and made him lose his memory, but he took the opportunity to break up with me and destroy all evidence of our relationship. Then, he hugged the unattainable first love, pushing his disgraced brother in front of me, smiling gently and distantly, saying, "Celeste, this is your boyfriend." Later, as I finally transferred my affections completely, he searched for renowned doctors, trying everything to help me regain my memory, remorsefully choking out repeatedly, "Celeste, you clearly love me." I just calmly smiled at his hysteria, asking him, "Is that so? Where's the evidence?" Chapter 1. On the way back from the hospital, I stumbled upon the trending news of the actor Spencer's relationship. Paparazzi revealed a video of him and famous actress Nina holding hands as they entered a hotel. Before the netizens could react, the two openly admitted their relationship, disclosing that they had known each other for a long time, reuniting after a separation, unable to contain their emotions. The news exploded, and the entire internet began to bless them. The actor Spencer and Nina's journey through the entertainment industry, culminating in a grand reunion, made countless netizens tear up over this beautiful love story. Within half an hour, articles detailing the beginning and end of their relationship flooded the internet. I carefully checked the video's information and then read the relationship article from start to finish, not missing a single word. They met in high school, Spencer had a crush, they went their separate ways after the college entrance exam, Spencer often visited her university but never disturbed her. Later, they both entered the entertainment industry, rising from obscurity to stardom. As one trending topic after another exploded, most comments mentioned, "Wow. Secret crush plus first love plus reunion after a long time plus reaching the peak together, this is a killer combo. Real couples are the best." Yes, the two of them were currently starring in a university campus drama, filmed at N University where I teach, playing the leading roles. That was also the reason I ended up in the hospital. According to my colleagues who came to visit me, as we passed by a set being constructed for filming after leaving the library, we ran into Spencer and Nina. Due to a worker's mistake, a prop wooden box fell, and I quickly rushed forward, shouting danger, then pushed Spencer out of the way, taking the hit from the falling box for him. I fainted on the spot and remained unconscious for 3 days. When I woke up, I had lost my memory. Exiting the trending news, I opened WeChat. I instinctively scrolled my friends list to the top, hesitated for a moment, not sure where to land my finger. My heart felt strangely heavy. I rolled down the car window, closed my eyes, leaning back in the seat, letting the evening breeze tousle my hair. In reality, I knew about Spencer and Nina's relationship earlier than anyone else. It was the second day after I woke up when Spencer appeared in my hospital room. After returning my phone that I had left at the accident scene, he politely and distantly said, "Celeste, thank you very much. We will cover all medical expenses, and if you need anything else, you can contact my agent." After that, he placed a plain black business card in front of me, and as if he had solved a long-standing problem, he smiled at me and said, "Celeste, thank you, thank you." I gazed at his deep and handsome features, feeling a bit dazed. As he turned to leave without hesitation, my heart panicked, and I blurted out, "Wait." A sudden throbbing pain struck my head, and I looked at him with furrowed brows, struggling to speak. "Spencer, did we know each other before?" It's not because of the roles he played, nor because of entertainment news, it's just simply, we already knew each other. After a moment of silence, the one who entered through the door was Nina. She wore a white dress made of sheer fabric, her slightly curled long hair falling behind her shoulders. Without any hesitation, she affectionately hugged Spencer's arm in front of me, took off her sunglasses, and said to me, "Of course, you two know each other." Amidst my growing confusion, another tall figure appeared in the ward, and Spencer pushed that person in front of me, smiling as he said, "Celeste, this is your boyfriend. Coincidentally, he's also my friend." Chapter 2. His name is Scott. The second son of the largest group in City N, the Bennett family, with numerous scandals, debauchery, drinking, speeding, fighting, you name it. All of this I found out later when I searched online. To be honest, no matter how rich my imagination is, I couldn't figure out how we met and fell in love. After Spencer said those words, I almost instinctively looked at Scott, asking him, "Are you my boyfriend?" His peach blossom eyes slightly reddened, he squatted halfway beside the bed, looking up at me seriously, his voice very gentle. "Or maybe not. What I mean is, if you don't remember me, it's okay. We can get to know each other again, and I can court you again." Actually, the familiarity I felt with him was far less than what I felt when I saw Spencer. But inexplicably, as I lowered my head slightly and looked into his eyes, something deep in my heart seemed to want to burst out. In the extreme lack of security caused by amnesia, and under the premise of the various evidence he provided, I considered this indescribable feeling as my forgotten love for him. I chose to believe him. After a period of contact, I discovered that the person himself was completely different from the rumors online. The unpredictable person in the rumors, while taking care of me in the hospital, never showed impatience. Instead, he was considerate, gentle, and meticulous. Only once, when I winced in pain due to a nurse's mistake with the needle, he immediately coldly said, "Leave, get someone else." The seemingly indifferent person in the rumors actually had excellent cooking skills and almost took care of every meal for me. And at this moment, because I unintentionally fell asleep, he carefully drove the car slowly and steadily. When I woke up, I was covered with his black coat. The sunlight outside filled half the sky, and Scott was under a nearby tree answering the phone, his sleeves rolled up to the middle of his forearm, his messy hair blown by the wind. Turning my head, I saw he had noticed I was awake and was walking towards me after hanging up the phone. Although I accepted his identity as my boyfriend, I still felt somewhat distant from him. As he walked to the window, I carefully apologized, holding the coat. "Sorry, I accidentally fell asleep. Did I keep you waiting?" He opened the car door, protecting my head as he helped me out, then bent down slightly, focusing on my eyes, and said earnestly and firmly, "Celeste, remember, you have absolute priority with me." 15 minutes later, we stepped out of the elevator and stood in front of a door. Scott skillfully entered the code and opened the door. Instantly, a familiar yet unfamiliar scent rushed towards me. I walked in somewhat sluggishly, stopping in front of the pure white sideboard where a photo was displayed. To be precise, it was a photo of me and a blurry figure. It seemed like a selfie, with the blurry figure behind frosted glass. It was clear that it was an adult male, but it was hard to identify who exactly it was. I suddenly remembered a colleague whispering to me while peeling oranges at the ward a while back. "You used to mention having a boyfriend, but never disclosed who he was. He never came to visit you, so secretive." Some imaginative colleagues even guessed it might be a big celebrity. "So it's the second son of the Bennett family." I gently touched the figure behind the glass frame with my hand, and for the first time since meeting him, I called out his name. Scott. Chapter 3. The next time I saw Spencer was on a Wednesday evening when I returned to school to continue teaching. Walking back to my office from the lab building, I passed by an empty classroom and saw him and Nina being interviewed by reporters sitting by the window. The golden sunset streamed through the white curtains fluttering in the wind, casting a light over half of Spencer's body, like a shallow glow. There was something I had never told anyone. Late at night, I would often find myself inexplicably sad, a sourness in my heart that almost kept me from falling asleep. It felt like losing someone very important, and when I tossed and turned, the image of Spencer would appear in my mind. Then I would suddenly wake up, incredulously asking myself, "Celeste, what are you thinking?" No one could tell me why I thought of Spencer, just like now, no one could answer why seeing him and Nina sitting intimately side by side, smiling at each other, made me so upset. The reporters intentionally created a romantic atmosphere, all their questions revolving around the relationship between the two. She asked Spencer, "Can you describe Nina in one sentence?" Spencer turned his head affectionately to look at her, and gently said, "She is a beam of light that entered my dark life." I thought about it, and this was probably like the summary netizens had for the two. Having experienced an abusive father's alcoholism since childhood, the resilient but poor male lead meets a gentle and kind wealthy daughter in high school, finding redemption. From then on, the wealthy daughter became his unattainable first love for life. After receiving the answer, the reporter chuckled and exclaimed, "Wow," then she turned to Nina and asked, "What similarities do you see between Spencer and the male lead in the drama you're currently filming?" She answered without hesitation, "Of course, it's loyalty." I stood quietly at the back door, like a dark voyeur, peeking at their hard-earned happiness. Suddenly, the ringtone from my phone in my pocket caught me off guard, pulling me back from my wandering thoughts and interrupting their interview. The spacious and bright classroom seemed like it had been paused for a moment, with several pairs of eyes turning towards me. I hurriedly pressed the end call button, clutching my phone tightly, suppressing the inexplicable sourness deep in my heart, and apologized. "Sorry for disturbing you, I was just passing by, I'll leave now." Nina smiled calmly. "Celeste, you're not disturbing, we were just finishing up." As soon as she finished speaking, the reporter said since we knew each other, she would leave first to catch the next schedule. Soon, only the three of us were left. Nina gracefully walked up to me, gently inquiring, "Since you unexpectedly saved our Spencer, some compensation is only fair." "Celeste, how much do you need?" I was taken aback, glanced at Spencer still sitting in his seat without moving, his back still turned towards me, then looked back at Nina in front of me. I explained seriously that I had never thought about any compensation. Nina's voice remained gentle and leisurely, but each word carried a warning. "Celeste, remember your role as a teacher. But don't let unfounded fantasies arise from this." Chapter 4. After the interview aired, Spencer was dubbed the limitless romantic ceiling of the entertainment industry, with his popularity and fan base constantly growing. I started intentionally avoiding anyone or anything related to him, shifting my focus to Scott. Although I couldn't remember the reason why I was with him in the first place, it must have been a decision I made after careful consideration at the time. Now that an accident had occurred, I didn't want to hurt my loved one while in an amnesic state. So, despite a lingering confusion in my heart, I was still willing to get to know him again and fall in love anew. After contemplating for a while, I carefully asked him, "How did I interact with you before?" He was peeling a grapefruit for me at the time, paused his fingers at my words, turned his head to look at me earnestly, and said, "Celeste, you don't have to be like before. Just be yourself, and I'll love you no matter what you choose to do." In the moment of staring back at him in a daze, I realized what he meant. He didn't expect me to love him as I did before, but he would continue to love me as he did before. A subtle emotion suddenly surged in my heart, feeling an inexplicable sense of gratitude that the person by my side was him. From then on, we started living like any regular couple, going on dinner dates, strolling the streets, watching movies together. Occasionally, I would try hard to recall our past together, but the result was always a blank slate. But in the second month of my amnesia, when Scott came to pick me up from work at school, a colleague came running over with a beautifully packaged gift box, handing it to me with a happy face, saying, "Celeste, the watch we ordered together a year ago has arrived." In my puzzled expression, she explained that it was a watch store owned by her friend, where each watch was handmade and unique. One time when she took me to visit, I described my preferred style to the designer, ordered one, and said it was for my boyfriend. I also left a message card. To be honest, the watch was indeed exquisite and understated, but its temperament was completely different from Scott's. Below is the message I left on the card at that time. Scott remained silent throughout, only reaching out slowly to open that card, his furrowed brows suddenly relaxing. I thought he might also feel that the watch wasn't suitable for him, so I glanced at the multi-million-dollar watch on his wrist, and softly said, "If you don't like it, it's okay." After all, I didn't know if I had described it incorrectly to the designer at first, or if there was an issue during the watchmaking process, leading to the current situation. As soon as I finished speaking, he chuckled softly, his voice hoarse and unusual, saying to me word by word, "I like it, I really like it. As long as it's from you, I like it." After saying that, he immediately put on the watch I gave him and never took it off since. Later, I became curious about what message I had left on that card, so I opened it and took a look. It was indeed my handwriting, but on the clean and neat page, there was only one letter. S. I held the card in a daze amidst the whistling wind outside the window for a long time, guessing that it must be referring to Scott. Chapter 5. On the day Spencer and Nina's campus drama finished shooting, during a break in the meeting, I unintentionally came across their live stream. Someone asked him what made him fall for Nina. In the video, he shifted his gaze slightly, as if reminiscing, then looking back at Nina with tenderness, he said, "Her beauty is like nothing I've ever seen before." Considering his background, I could probably understand what he meant. For someone who had been in the dark, suddenly meeting someone completely opposite could indeed be alluring. After hearing his answer, someone else asked him in the chat, "After all these years, have you really never had feelings for anyone else, only liking Nina?" Seeing the question, he suddenly fell silent for a few seconds, a faint smile appearing on his lips. During those quiet seconds, no one knew whether he was confirming his feelings or thinking of someone else. But after the silence, he looked at the screen and confidently answered, "No." The barrage in the live chat erupted in cheers, fans frantically sending hearts and roses. It was in that instant that I suddenly realized, I hadn't thought of him in a long time, and even if I were to see him again now, there would be no ripples in my heart. The feeling of sleepless nights and emptiness had long disappeared, and I couldn't pinpoint when. For some reason, this discovery made me feel relaxed and somewhat joyful. Later, when the meeting ended, I joyfully walked to the school gate with an umbrella in hand. In the misty night, I saw Scott's car parked quietly under a dim streetlight. It was 9 o'clock at night, 3.5 hours after I had been notified last minute about the meeting and messaged him to not wait for me. Rain slid down the window in streams, making my heart suddenly feel damp. Surprised, I sighed helplessly as I got into the car. "It's so late, I told you not to wait for me." He carefully wiped the water droplets off my cheek with a towel. His clear, dark eyes met mine, and he said very seriously, "But I wanted to see you." So, he kept waiting for me. Inside the narrow, slightly damp car, an unknown chaotic atmosphere arose. I gazed at his handsome features, my heartbeat uncontrollably quickening. It seemed like I understood why my past self had fallen for him, even though I couldn't remember. I thought, if nothing unexpected happened, Scott would be the one I'd be willing to spend my life with. Even if I couldn't remember the past, I would eventually fall for him again. But, unfortunately, something unexpected did happen. Half a month later, on a twilight evening with rosy clouds in the sky, Scott and I were walking on a commercial street after leaving a restaurant, heading to a nearby flower shop to buy a bouquet of hyacinths. Suddenly, a huge billboard on the exterior of a building collapsed. It was an advertisement for rings, loving only one person in a lifetime, shot by Spencer and Nina. Scott quickly shielded me and pulled me aside, narrowly escaping danger. However, the loud crash of the billboard hitting the ground, the chaotic sounds of people and cars, and the overly familiar scene caused a strong ringing in my ears as I felt dizzy. Until the sudden blare of the police siren, like a sharp blade, unexpectedly cut open a crack in my dusty memories. Countless fragments of images rushed into my mind one after another. Chapter 6. Spencer and I, we have known each other for 18 years as childhood sweethearts. We were also a couple for 4 years. The year we met, he was a frail young man who had lost his mother at a young age and was often abused by his father. As for me, I was a girl trafficked and sold to that poor and remote little mountain village. I once saved him with water held in a lotus leaf when he collapsed on the roadside due to injuries from domestic violence under the scorching sun. He, in turn, protected me from the village ruffians when they bullied me, gripping a stone tightly in his hand. In those dark times, every word he taught me was a shining star carrying my wishes. Until one day, I saw a handwritten message in a book donated from outside the mountains that he brought. "As long as you never give up, you will surely see hope." The buried hope in my heart suddenly sprouted, and I told Spencer, "We can't rot here, let's escape, Spencer." I wasn't allowed to read or roam freely, but Spencer could. If he wanted to leave, he could. At first, he hesitated, but after nearly being beaten to death by his alcoholic father, we fled. That year, I was 13 and it was my 5th year in the mountain village. After that, we went through a long and arduous period. Fortunately, with the help of social assistants, we had the opportunity to study. However, because I had never been to school, I was much behind Spencer in academics. So when he was in high school, I was still catching up on middle school content. It was around that time that Spencer met Nina. But the first time I heard this name and saw this person was after Spencer's college entrance exam on the night of their graduation party. I was waiting outside the hotel for Spencer with my coat on, and after it ended, as I was carefully supporting the drunken Spencer, I suddenly heard someone shout, "Nina." In that moment, Spencer's body froze imperceptibly, and I subconsciously looked in the direction of the voice, not seeing the face clearly, but only a beautiful slender figure. When we returned, Spencer collapsed in my arms, mumbling incoherently as if talking to himself. For someone like me who is deeply trapped in the quagmire, how can I ever touch the moon? I thought he was talking about dreams, so I later studied hard, earned money, analyzed every character role he got, applied for numerous fake accounts to encourage him as his fan. Carefully guarding his dreams. But I never expected that the moon he mentioned was Nina. In the past, he was stuck in the mire, unable to reach the moon. Later, he became a shining star, and the moon came to him. The first movie they acted in together was after he won the Best Actor award. They played each other's first love in the movie, but Nina's character died in the year when the male lead, played by Spencer, loved her the most. So despite having few scenes and almost no lines, the romantic setting, deep love, and unforgettable ending made her quite popular even though she had just debuted. After that, almost every movie she starred in was related to Spencer. Until this campus drama. So everything made sense, and the day he said he didn't have time to go to the Southern City Temple with me to pray for blessings every year was the day he was with Nina at the hotel. And then, when I was injured and lost my memory, he ended our relationship, destroying all evidence of us being together. Chapter 7. Scott drove the car extremely fast, finally stopping outside the hospital. Still worried, he carefully helped me out of the car, intending to take me to see a doctor for a checkup. I let him hold my hand, absent-mindedly following behind him. The knuckles on his hand were scraped and bleeding from the ground, his black shirt stained with dirt while protecting me, his messy short hair tousled by the evening breeze, looking somewhat disheveled. This was a stark contrast to when I first met him. At a colleague's birthday party 6 months ago, on my way back to the booth from the restroom, I accidentally entered their booth due to the harassment of a drunken man. Under the dim flickering lights, there were various handsome men and beautiful women gathered. But at a glance, I saw Scott lounging on the sofa with his long legs casually crossed, playing with a lighter. At that time, he was noble and elegant, lazy and carefree, a person who even made Spencer sitting next to him pale in comparison. Later, the drunk man held onto me tightly, claiming I was his girlfriend. Spencer avoided my pleading gaze, and everyone else watched without interfering. Only Scott, only he dropped the lighter and walked up to me. His overpowering presence made the drunk man freeze momentarily. Scott asked me, "Are you his girlfriend?" I shook my head in panic and helplessness, explaining urgently and firmly. "No, I'm not, I don't know him." After my words, he suddenly smiled at me, comforting. "Don't be afraid, you're beautiful, I believe you." Then, before anyone could react, he quickly grasped the drunk man's wrist, forced him to let go of me, and without hesitation, smashed a bottle of alcohol on his head. A loud bang echoed through the compartment, instantly silencing everyone. In a daze, he escorted me back to the compartment, and I forgot to even thank him. Initially, I thought he was just being chivalrous, until the party ended and I passed by that compartment again, seeing the door slightly ajar, the crowd dispersing. Someone asked Scott, "Why did you step in to save her?" After a while, Scott finally spoke softly, his voice filled with tenderness and affection that I remembered for a long time. He said, "In those eyes, I saw her shadow." Her. The memories abruptly stopped, and I suddenly halted in my tracks, gripping his hand tightly. The hospital bustled around us. Scott turned back in confusion, gently asking, "What's wrong?" Avoiding his gaze, my eyes fell on his wrist, and my throat inexplicably felt sore as I spoke. "I'm fine, no need for a checkup." And, Scott, take off the watch, it wasn't meant for you. Referring to Spencer. Chapter 8. I got into a taxi with the watch, watching as the figure standing still like a sculpture in the rearview mirror gradually disappeared. Searching keywords related to Spencer on my phone, I carefully went through every detail of him and Nina. Until I saw a recent scene where they reenacted a confession on a wilderness reality show they participated in. Flower fields, sunsets, hot air balloons, and infinite romance and love. The dampness in my eyes was dried by the wind. I remembered the night when Spencer first asked me to be with him. That year, when I was a junior, returning from a classmate's dinner, a male classmate offered to walk me home. When he suddenly confessed, I was too shocked to react, and before I knew it, Spencer, who had just returned, pulled me away. He coldly said to the male classmate, "She already has a boyfriend." I stood there in a daze until the male classmate apologized and left. Only then did I react, quietly asking Spencer, "What did you just say?" He didn't let go of my hand and said to me, "Celeste, let's be together." I did indeed like him. When I was 8 years old, I was abducted and taken to a mountain village. I cried so much that I was beaten, had a high fever for several days, and ended up forgetting many people and things. Later, I revived Spencer, who was unconscious on the side of the road. Watching him walk away, I inexplicably felt the urge to follow him. We depended on each other for decades, witnessing each other at our most desperate moments. So finally being together with him felt like the most natural thing. To accommodate him, I never publicly acknowledged our relationship, using just a small "s" to convey my feelings. Not long after we got together, he rose to fame with a supporting role in less than half an hour. From then on, he soared to success. And the distance between us grew wider. Now looking back, if either of the conditions, Nina didn't leave, or the male classmate didn't confess to me, had not been met, Spencer wouldn't have proposed being together with me. After all, he never said he liked me. Closing the page, paying for the ride, I casually threw the watch into a trash can on the roadside. Since he wanted to erase all our past, I didn't want it either. If it weren't for the unexpected abduction incident back then, we would have been two people from completely different worlds, never meant to have any connection. Just like now. And in the future. I had no intention of entangling with Spencer. He wasn't worth a single ounce of my emotions. However, on the second day after I regained my memory, news of his relationship with Nina went viral again. It started when the two of them encountered a rainstorm and a landslide while exploring the mountains in a wilderness reality show. Due to inadequate protection measures by the crew, everyone, including staff members, got injured to varying degrees. Spencer was the most severely injured. At the time, he carried the limping Nina on his back, walking at the end of the line in a low-lying area. When the danger occurred, Spencer carried Nina to a higher place, but Nina, scared of falling rocks and trees, didn't turn back to help Spencer and instead ran away. The chaotic and fragmented videos were leaked, stirring up discussions online. Some believed it, while others doubted it. Among the trending comments were, "How could a girl like Nina move a tall guy like Spencer? She must have called for help. I understand, when disaster strikes, everyone looks out for themselves. Why wasn't Nina the one in trouble? How does she deserve Spencer's affection?" And the only two people who knew the truth. Nina remained silent from beginning to end. Spencer narrowly escaped death, but he lost a leg and fell into a coma. A colleague holding a phone sighed. "Are these two cursed? Last time you saved them from a disaster, now an even more serious one strikes. It seems they can't escape misfortune." I turned off the screen and chuckled. Perhaps. Chapter 9. I never mentioned the recovery of my memories to anyone other than Scott, so I was unaware of the events that led to our separation. My life returned to normal, but I would often find myself glancing at a window seat that was rarely occupied before class. There, Scott would sneak in wearing a black hoodie and a matching baseball cap to listen to my lectures. In a classroom of over 100 people, whenever he appeared, my eyes would always find him. But he never disturbed me, only focusing intently on sketching with a pen on paper. The blank sheets, the ink lines, every few strokes he made would outline me, lecturing in class. Almond-shaped eyes, arched eyebrows, hair pulled back, even the small mole between my eyebrows was included. I was amazed by his drawing skills. Holding up the sketch, he would marvel. The person I draw looks so beautiful. One day, lost in thought again as I passed through the sea of heads before class, a student from the front row leaned over and asked, "Are you waiting for someone, teacher?" I tightened my grip on the textbook, smiled, and naturally replied, "I'm not waiting for anyone." And no one would come. After the bell rang, I stood on the podium as usual, waiting for the students to leave. A few minutes later, as I descended the podium holding my book, a sudden gust of wind blew in through the open window, lifting a piece of paper from somewhere and swirling it around the classroom before finally landing in front of the door. The bright sunlight illuminated the paper, each line perfectly visible. My heart skipped a beat, and I turned to look at the empty classroom, standing there for a long time. I had to admit that if my feelings for Spencer died during the amnesia period, then my feelings for Scott also grew during that time. But more than anyone else, I knew he didn't truly like me. So, ever since regaining my memory, I had been deliberately avoiding meeting him. Until that night when I attended a pre-wedding party hosted by a wealthy colleague. Stepping out of the lively box for some air, leaning against the glass railing of the hotel to reply to messages, I casually looked up and saw someone in the transparent elevator across the way. It was Scott. Dressed in a plain black shirt, sleeves rolled up to his forearms, left hand holding a suit jacket, right hand casually in his pocket. Behind him, a few people around his age. Our eyes met, and as the elevator stopped, I saw someone pat his shoulder, reminding him it was time to go. I averted my gaze and returned to the booth. Someone handed me a glass of grapefruit juice and asked if I wanted to attend the next event after the party, to which I politely declined. Sitting in a dim corner, I stared at the flashing lights, reminiscing inappropriately about the first time I saw Scott in the hospital room when I just woke up from amnesia. In fact, the evidence he provided for us being together had many loopholes, and if I thought about it carefully, I could find the flaws. But at that time, just having lost my memory, I needed security so badly that I subconsciously found reasons to rationalize everything that seemed irrational. I'm sure when Spencer made the decision to leave me, he never considered the danger I would face. Looking back now, I'm grateful that the person pretending to be my boyfriend was Scott. After the party ended, I sat alone in the quiet booth for a while until I finished the last sip of grapefruit juice in my glass and got up to open the booth door. And there, standing outside the door for who knows how long, was Scott. With his hands in his pockets, leaning casually against the wall, he seemed like he had been waiting for this door to open. A faint smell of alcohol lingered in the air, and I fell silent for a moment before asking him, "Is there something you need?" "I want to see you." His overly candid reply left me momentarily speechless, so I sighed and told him, "Scott, we have no relationship anymore. What if I say I truly like you?" I had imagined in front of the mirror how much I resembled that girl to make him so affectionate and unwilling to let go. But he saved me once and deceived me once. Consider it even. So, when he spoke again, saying, "Celeste, actually, I cut him off. Do I need to be blunt? Scott, I don't want any kind of relationship with you, whether in the past, present, or future. The lesson learned from Spencer told me that a wrong relationship should never have existed from the start." Perhaps due to the lighting, his face momentarily paled, and he opened his mouth, taking a while before asking me in a somewhat hoarse voice, "Don't we even get to be friends?" I looked at him, firmly refusing. "I don't need you as a friend." Chapter 10. I thought that clarifying things with Scott would bring inner peace, but it didn't. Every night, tossing and turning, all I could think of was his pallid face. Every little thing experienced during the short time we were together began to vividly resurface in my mind. The bad thing was, he kept coming to see me, always finding ways to be around me. Over time, I became particularly sensitive to his figure, name, and the faint scent of pine that was unique to him. Even seeing someone similar made me subconsciously avoid them. I knew I wasn't avoiding him. It was my own heart. The day I saw the news of Scott becoming the new head of the Bennett family, I was shopping at the supermarket. countless financial and entertainment media outlets reported on him. Orphaned at a young age, father remarried, and the child brought by the stepmother turned out to be his half-brother. He was oppressed, loathed, had to hide his strength, disguise his ambition, all to seize power one day. It's worth mentioning that someone found out he had been doing charity work since he was a child, donating supplies to orphanages and remote mountain areas every year. Standing between shelves filled with various juices, I looked up at the large screen hanging above, showing numerous journalists thrusting microphones in front of Scott during interviews. In the video, he was not the carefree person described by online friends, nor the gentle and refined person I remembered. He appeared cold and distant, looking down on others with an air of authority. When reporters deliberately asked why he was sitting in that position instead of his studious, highly capable brother, he disdainfully glanced at the person in front of him and gave a faint smile. Don't you understand the principle of the strong rising to power? I don't know why, but I suddenly remembered the scene when he saved me by smashing a bottle at someone. Perhaps that was the real him, gentle yet fierce, cool yet crazy. But the short time we spent together didn't allow me to understand his family, so this was the first time I learned about his background. I had speculated that those rumors were intentional on his part, but I hadn't expected this reason. The next moment, a gossip reporter in the video asked, "There are reports that President Scott has been looking for a girl, is it his love interest?" The scene fell silent for a moment. Scott looked gently at the camera and said, "Yes." I calmly averted my gaze and continued shopping. It wasn't until I was at the checkout that I realized I had picked up the wrong juice. Chapter 11. After that, Scott continued to appear by my side as always. Although he never mentioned being together again, everything he did told me he hadn't given up. When my car broke down in heavy rain, he would be the first to arrive. When I sprained my ankle while hiking, he would show up and carry me down the mountain. Until one time when I was recovering at home from the flu I caught at school, he knocked on the door. At that time, I hadn't fully recovered, and the little sanity I had left was reminding me to keep my distance from him. So after saying, "Stay away from me, I might infect you," I was about to close the door. He reached out to block me, squeezed into the house and closed the door behind him, looking at me, saying, "I'm not afraid." With my head foggy from the medicine, I didn't have the energy to argue with him, so I just lay down on the couch and let him do as he pleased. When I was with Spencer before, every time I got sick, he rarely had time to accompany me. Most of the time, I would go to the hospital alone, take medicine alone, and slowly recover alone. I'm not a delicate person. He's busy, and I understand that. Without his care, I can take care of myself. But now, in a daze, I see Scott feeding me water one moment, and cooking porridge in the kitchen the next, which piqued my curiosity. So, I asked him, "Scott, aren't you busy?" Just taking over the company, there would only be more matters for him to handle, not less. For him, it would only be a waste of time here. He crouched beside the couch, carefully wiping my cheek with a damp towel, his breath falling lightly on my side face, almost unavoidable. After a long pause, I finally heard him say, "Celeste, I remember saying that nothing is more important than you." Perhaps because my emotions were more sensitive after being sick, my heart couldn't help but feel a wave of sourness. Clearly, when I got sick before and was alone, I didn't feel this way. I closed my eyes and fell silent, but I couldn't sleep no matter what. The only thing I could hear was his very gentle movements, not disturbing me but making me feel incredibly reassured. After what seemed like a long time, night had already fallen. I opened my eyes and saw Scott in the kitchen, holding a bunch of medicine boxes and reading the instructions. The orange sunset shone through the glass onto him. I stepped on the soft carpet, walked over, quietly leaned against the kitchen door, watched his back, and then said in a hoarse voice, "Scott, did you find that girl?" He visibly stiffened at my words, set down the medicine box in his hand, turned to look at me, and replied, "I did." My throat felt sore, and I wanted to ask why he still bothered me if he found her. But to maintain some dignity, I asked him, "Aren't you two together?" He took a step closer, sighed, and said, "She said she didn't want to be with me, didn't want any relationship with me." So, did he come to me as a substitute? And I was just basking in her light, briefly loved for a moment. I felt my heart tremble a bit, lowered my head to avoid his gaze, tears streaming down my face, dripping onto his pants. In the end, I compromised and spoke. Scott, can you not do this anymore? I admit that I like you, but that doesn't mean I'll abandon my principles to be a substitute. Why do you have to push relentlessly? His breath deepened, and he repeated word by word. Like me? I bowed my head, silently shedding tears until he suddenly held me tightly in his arms. Despite my heavily clouded mind due to fluctuating emotions, I could still hear him say, Celeste, it was you who said you didn't want any relationship with me. At that moment, the tense strings in my heart suddenly broke, and something slowly emerged in my mind. I asked him belatedly. It was me? He gently pressed my head against his chest, his voice low and hoarse. Yes, it was you. 18 years in total, it's really been too long. Chapter 12. Since I was 8 years old, after being beaten and having a high fever for several days, I forgot everything that came before that. My earliest memories began from when I was 8 years old. So, I didn't know who my parents or relatives were. Even though I later thought about finding my family, there had been no news for so many years. But I would have never imagined that Scott was my family from before I was 8 years old. When I was 3, my parents died in a chemical explosion. I was taken in and raised by my mother's best friend. After that, Scott appeared in my life. We were together for 5 years, until I turned 8. That year, Scott's father used the excuse of taking me to see Scott to meet his first love. And then he lost me. For the following 18 years, Scott had been searching for me. That's what he told me. But this memory that had long disappeared from my mind, and might never resurface, made me unsure if I was the person he was looking for. After all, I had no family for a long time, so how could I prove it? What if he mistook me for someone else? I asked him this question the next day. In response, he handed me a photo album containing all our pictures together. From the age of 3 until the year I turned 8. Without exception, there was a small mole between the left eyebrows of the girl in the photos. After I turned 8, in every picture where he appeared, there was a hand-drawn girl beside him. That was his drawing of me. Drawn for 18 years. Perhaps noticing my silence and fearing that it touched upon painful memories, he casually spoke. I imagined you growing up every year, but it was only imagination, nowhere near as lovely as the real you. I held the photo album quietly, listening, and then asked him. Is it just because of this mole between my eyebrows? He paused, took out our last photo together, turned it over, and on the back, there was a crooked sentence written. Forever together. Underneath the words were 2 tiny fingerprints. As I looked at the sentence, I heard Scott chuckle self-deprecatingly. At that time, no one knew that right after we said we would be together forever, we completely separated. Shortly after that, Scott took me to visit my parents and his mother separately. I also saw the person he mentioned, the culprit who caused his mother's death and lost me. His father. In the cold and lonely hospital room, Scott held my hand and stood in front of the bed, smiling casually, and said to the person in the bed who couldn't speak due to a stroke. Let me tell you some good news, okay? Afterwards, he opened a paternity test report in front of him and said word by word. Congratulations, you've raised someone else's son for 29 years. You better live well, don't accidentally anger yourself to death and dirty the path for my mom's reincarnation. After saying that, he slammed the report on his father, his eyes red with tears as he smiled, then he hugged me and left the hospital room. Before leaving, I glanced back at the person in the hospital bed, who, after being shocked, looked hopelessly at the ceiling, tears shimmering in their eyes. Of course, I wouldn't sympathize with him. He sowed the seeds of his own downfall, so he should taste the fruit himself. Chapter 13. The next news I heard about Spencer was that he woke up from a coma. Soon after, he and Nina suddenly broke up, causing a hot topic online. The once blessed relationship on the internet ended in a messy manner. But the truth of what happened at that time was no longer of interest to anyone. Shortly after that, Nina was photographed having dinner and watching a movie with a rising star. For the second time, the two of them openly admitted their relationship. It was said to be their first love, childhood friends who met again and continued their fate. A new batch of shippers exclaimed. "Oh my God. Childhood sweethearts plus first love plus rekindled love, it's killing me." Spencer's leg wasn't completely paralyzed, and he could walk with the help of crutches. During the time he was in the hospital after waking up, he called me countless times. I looked at the string of numbers, so familiar yet without a name, and didn't answer a single one. Finally, I put him on the blacklist. Later, he probably used someone else's phone to call me. Once, I accidentally picked up and heard him call out at Celeste, before hanging up directly. In fact, before he was discharged, I passed by his hospital room while visiting a respected professor. At that time, it seemed like he was arguing with Nina, both of them emotionally unstable. I could clearly hear Nina loudly asking him. "It's not like I intentionally didn't pull you. It was so dangerous at the time. What if I got hit? Spencer, don't you love me? Why blame me? Besides, now you're just going to be a burden on me." After a long while, Spencer chuckled softly, his voice hoarse. "Get lost." I didn't know if that light chuckle was him mocking his supposed mutual devotion or regretting the years of deep affection. But that has nothing to do with me. However, shortly after he was discharged, he came looking for me. I wasn't very surprised, knowing that this day would come sooner or later. That night, as I stepped out of the elevator holding a bouquet of hyacinths, I saw him standing outside my door leaning on a crutch. Dressed in a black windbreaker, his hair cut short, eyes bloodshot, cheeks slightly sunken, looking noticeably thinner. Seeing me, he approached with red eyes. "Celeste." I took a step back, looking at him distantly. "Spencer, are we very familiar?" He suddenly grabbed my hand, urgently speaking. "Celeste, I'm your boyfriend, not Scott." "He's lying to you. Nina and I are just in a contractual relationship, Celeste. The person you like has always been me." I looked at him calmly and puzzled, then slowly pulled my hand away, asking him. "Is that so? How can you prove that the person you like is me?" He couldn't provide any evidence. Then he started trying to take me to see a doctor, saying, "Celeste, you've just forgotten me. Once you remember, you'll know who you truly like. I found the most famous neurologist, he will definitely help you regain your memory." I didn't cooperate with him going to the hospital, so he started talking about the past. Saying we had escaped together from a remote mountain, promising to be together forever while living in a basement and eating instant noodles. He mentioned how I had tirelessly taken care of him when he was sick, and how I had waited all night in the snow to accompany him during an acting audition. You see, he remembered everything. But he still had no hesitation in letting me go. The person who once least wanted me to regain my memory was now trying everything to make me remember. I guess back then he never thought he would turn back one day. Looking at him, eyes slightly red, with a pleading and humble look. I remained indifferent. The afternoon when I refused to see him again, I received a letter. It was one I had written 4 years ago. It was when Spencer and I had just gotten together, and there was a sudden trend online to write letters to our future selves. I found it interesting and convinced Spencer to write together. But he didn't write, only I did. If nothing unexpected happened, this was probably the only evidence we had ever been together. The sky after the rain was filled with the glow of the setting sun, the horizon seemed to be on fire. I walked into the bathroom holding the letter, but I didn't open it. I burned it. After that, for a long time, due to health and work reasons, he was overwhelmed and couldn't continue bothering me. We met again in early autumn. I was walking on the Wutong Road after coming out of the library, the yellowing leaves gently falling, and when I saw a pavilion not far away, I unconsciously stopped in my tracks. It was here where it all began. I heard the rustling sound of footsteps on the Wutong leaves behind me. I stood still and listened to a deep, hoarse voice. "It was here where you shielded me from a wooden box, and then forgot about me ever since." Somehow, I suddenly remembered the trending topic I had seen a few days ago. The top actor who reunited with Nina had a girlfriend, but he deceived his girlfriend by claiming that he and Nina were just creating hype, only to be caught cheating later. His girlfriend immediately provided evidence of their affair and interference. Among the angry comments from netizens, someone began summarizing Nina's representative works since her debut. Dating the movie king. Dating the top actor. As for Spencer, his leg injury limited his acting career. Despite having fans who vowed to never leave him, they gradually shifted their attention to younger, more attractive actors with better physical conditions. Sooner or later, he would end up in obscurity. After completing the last movie about rebirth and changing destiny, he announced that he would no longer act in any TV dramas or movies. He would only occasionally participate in some variety shows. But at least, he left behind the title of emotional ceiling of the entertainment industry. After all, following that, whenever he participated in any variety show or event, the host would introduce him with this title. Wow, welcome our emotional ceiling of the entertainment industry, Spencer. No one knew how he truly felt every time he heard this title. Just like our story, no one would ever know. As my thoughts drifted, I turned around to look at him, smiling with relief. Is that so? I don't remember. After saying that, I turned and walked away. A few steps later, the wind carried his murmured words to my ears. If I could go back to the year we met, I would never let go of your hand again. My steps faltered slightly, I curved my lips, and continued walking forward. He was wrong. If I could go back to that year, I wouldn't meet him again. Now, I'm just back on the right track of destiny. At the end of the road, Scott was standing there. I ran towards him, he reached out and caught me, then led me to an extremely romantic private garden. Since I had learned about my background, neither of us had implicitly mentioned the idea of being together. So at this moment, I thought he was going to confess, but instead, I saw him slowly walking towards me with a cake, saying, "Celeste, happy birthday." For a moment, holding the flowers, I felt a sense of daze. It turned out, this day was my true birthday. Later, he placed 18 exquisitely wrapped boxes in front of me, his deep black eyes glistening. This is a belated 18-year gift. Feeling a bit emotional, I smiled tearfully at him. Scott, you don't have to be this good to me, actually. The feeling of being cherished made me feel somewhat at a loss. He cupped my face, gazing deeply into my eyes. I signed a lifelong commitment to treat you well. Looking at his handsome face so close to me, my heart fluttered, and I tiptoed to give him a peck on the cheek. Instantly, his whole body stiffened, a quick flush of red spreading from his ears. It made me want to laugh. While he stood there in a daze, I took a watch out of the box, glanced at his empty wrist, and said to him, "Give me your hand." He obediently extended his hand towards me, allowing me to carefully put the watch on him. A subtle atmosphere wafted in the air, somehow giving me the illusion of putting a ring on him. After I finished putting on the watch and admired it earnestly, he suddenly grabbed the back of my head, swiftly leaning in to steal my breath. A few minutes later, I opened the phone camera to take a look because I forgot to breathe and ended up with a level of blushing not much different from his. Just as I was about to check if my lips were chapped, Scott suddenly barged into the frame, grabbed my hand and the phone, and pressed the shutter button. From that moment on, the missing photo from when we were 8 years old. Starting over from this moment.
Extra, Scott. The longest journey I've taken in my life is the one to meet Celeste, a full 18 years. If it weren't for that initial accident, the person who should have grown up with her, the one by her side, should have been me. To this day, I can still remember that ordinary afternoon when I returned from cello class to find out that Celeste had gone missing. I was 10 years old that year, experiencing the feeling of separation from an important person for the first time, holding the photo we took the day before, staying up all night. After that, I began donating money and resources to various orphanages and impoverished areas for charity. Even if there was only a 1 in a million chance, I hoped Celeste could live better somewhere in a corner. I also learned how to paint, imagining what she would look like as she grew older. As our family business grew, my father's extramarital affair was discovered, and I found out that he used the excuse of taking Celeste to see me that day to meet his first love, resulting in Celeste getting lost. The following year, my mother passed away in depression. He and his first love, along with their illegitimate child, became a family. I became the most superfluous person. But there are no good things in this world. He used the money my mother brought to start a business, eventually driving my mother to her death, and they ended up living happily ever after. Later, under the surveillance and suppression of that woman, I became an unambitious playboy, mingling with a group of friends every day. Then, at a gathering, I met Celeste. When she rushed in, looking around with a pair of frightened eyes, my heart skipped a beat. But these 18 years, I have met too many people similar to her in my memory, and every time the result is disappointment. So this time, after sending her back to the compartment, I hesitated. What if the verification result is another disappointment? I heard that there is a 1,000-year-old tree in the ancient temple in the southern part of the city that can grant any wish. I used to not believe it, but now I want to give it a try. After climbing 3,600 steps, I stood in front of the ancient tree under the sky, tied the wish ribbon tightly on a branch filled with red wish ribbons, folded my hands together, and devoutly whispered, "I hope to see her. I hope we can be together forever." Simultaneously with me saying this, a soft, somewhat familiar female voice spoke. As the words fell, all the wish ribbons on the tree suddenly fluttered in the wind, a crisp sound of bells came from the eaves, and through a swaying red curtain, I glanced at the other side of the tree. It was Celeste. Looking at her beautiful features, the thought of trying again suddenly emerged in my mind. If meeting once among millions is a coincidence, what about meeting twice? I remembered writing a sentence in a book when donating books one year. As long as you never give up, there will always be hope. I never gave up, so I really found her. Later, when I checked her past information, I discovered that she was with Spencer. Unexpectedly, not long after, she was injured and lost her memory because of Spencer, who wanted to take the opportunity to get rid of her for his unattainable first love. When I volunteered to help him, I once said, "Before, now, and in the future, Spencer, you will never have any connection with her again." At that time, he was so immersed in the joy of being with the unattainable first love that he didn't pay attention to my words. After that, I hurriedly destroyed the evidence of Celeste's acquaintance with him, making people search carefully for traces of them, and personally destroyed it again. Unless Celeste remembers and is willing to admit it, there is nothing that can prove they were together. Everyone said that my feelings for her were just a passing fancy, a boring pastime. No one knew how nervous and precious I felt when I pushed open the door of that ward and stood in front of her. Even though I had long disappeared from her memory. But it doesn't matter, we can get to know each other again. After 18 years, on that afternoon, we met for the first time. It was also a long-awaited reunion.